Welcome to the dark side of the female psyche with Michael Tsarion. Here we will be delving deeply into those dark corners of psychology that few have the courage to acknowledge, the evil that exists within the female psyche. This series aims to offer you viable solutions, resources, and potent insights that can aid you in your rehabilitation and empowerment. But be forewarned, this is a series not for the faint of heart, nor is it for the easily triggered. Rather, it is only for those courageous women who realize the severity of the hour humanity is in. This means if you're going to listen to this series, you need to be ready to take self-ownership over your reactions and your responses. Because while women do hold the power to change the world, the state and quality of that change will invariably be influenced by how well a woman knows her own psyche, how beautiful, honorable, and dignified that woman chooses to become. If you are a woman who is choosing to willfully evolve, if you are a woman who sincerely desires to master yourself, your mind, and your behavior, then the information shared throughout this series will serve you well.
Hi, Michael. Welcome back. The last episode really struck me. I felt like I was learning, like I'm finally starting to hook in and get a grip on what you're putting forth. And so I just say that because anyone who's watching this series, I highly encourage you to watch all the episodes because there's so much to learn here. And with each layer, we are learning more and getting deeper and deeper. And can't help but appreciate my own patience to that end because, as someone who's interviewing Michael, I'm going back and listening to the recording, so I have the benefit of hearing it a few times. And every time you hear it, it lands in a deeper and deeper way. And that's just one episode. So just imagine what you can glean from watching the whole series. And with this episode, we will be going in an interesting direction that I'm very curious to hear more about. So, Michael, you can take it wherever you like.
Oh, thanks, Sarah. Nice to be back again. And you're quite right about all of that. This is not something that's so trivial that you can get it all, grasp the whole significance of it in just one listen. That's impossible. It might take even many years to really fully appreciate what's being said here because I am compressing dozens of authors, all of who themselves come from different perspectives on this. Many of them have the female bias that we've talked about. Almost none of them are pro-male, even though, as I said, paradoxically, some of their works can have remarkably brilliant and insightful statements that I would definitely want to underline. On the whole, though, they got published, by the big New York houses and what have you, and the big European concerns, because this was fashionable at the time. Feminism needed this injection of male feminism. And that's what we've been kind of looking at. But it's very tricky because they themselves were very erudite people and they were very high up the totem pole. And so you have to stick very closely to their texts when you're criticizing them. Otherwise, it just looks like a lot of mudslinging from the outside. And feminists do enough of their own mudslinging to know how to combat that. But they're very less likely to take you on when you're sticking very closely to those texts and when you're finding contradictions in the works of feminists, be they male or female. And I've done that. And they're not going to take you on because they've had rowdy support from very big audiences in campuses and other venues throughout the world. Raucous applause, when they've spoken. And there's no Captain Kirk sitting in the first line to say, wait a minute, didn't anybody hear the glaring contradictions in this whole account, this historical account of yours? No, it's just drowned out by all the awesome applause down through the years. And it still goes on. So the little voice that wants to say, but you yourself have glaring contradictions in your work, and you people are very eminent. You're, bestsellers and all of this kind of thing, right? But how come it is that you've got these contradictions? And the contradictions are very serious. They're not small ones that, you can easily bypass. These are big contradictions that really help compromise the entire platform upon which some of these people stand. Now, these were New York bestsellers. So you're not going to get invited to the party. You see, your voice is not going to be heard. You will be censored. Or they'll find some other way to, ad hominem come at you with something unrelated,
Mm.
to the context of what you're talking. So yeah, you've got to really listen deep. I am compressing decades of research, personal research, and then the theories of other people, and coming at it from a certain angle. So it does take patience and does take time. Any kind of knee-jerk reaction is just absolutely infantile. That's not going to cut it. And trivial explanations of why I do my work. Oh, some woman must have hurt him, Yeah, right. Is that the best you can do? That's the best you can do. You're looking at my whole corpus. That's like saying to a doctor, Doctor, which cigarette hurt you that you decided to want to go and cure cancer? Yeah.
Wow.
Go ahead. Say that to the next doctor you meet. And we're on the same page then, honey bun, right? Yeah. Then, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's as far as you got, right? But yeah, let's move on. There's some very interesting things today. Last week we had a couple of slides about this psychotropic aspect, but we
Mm-hmm.
didn't flesh it out. And so that still needs to be looked at. In the series I did, or not the series, but the program I did called Female Illuminati, that was over 9 hours long. We filmed it live, and the edited version is over 6 hours. That also dealt with this, But you see, as I said, that was done in 2014. There's still more to look at. One pass isn't enough. So we'll just do another, I thought, a very short pass in our talk here, with that few more points to bring out, which I think will help show people the fraud that's behind feminism and help us understand something more about real female psychology as it truly is. Things like this goddess, alleged goddess tradition. Because I've gone into that in the Monstrous Feminine series on Unslaved, which is one of the best things I've done there. But it still needs to be gone into. So maybe let's dig into that. And again, this would be very valuable for people who've never heard any of this. So I was just intrigued to say, okay, let's do one more dive into this today to see what the feminists themselves have to say and see if we can sort of approach things, from a novel point of view.
Okay, so we can start with the first slide in that case.
Okay.
That the first time measurements ever made, the first formal calendars, were women's lunar markings on painted pebbles and carved sticks is also known. And it is thoroughly known that the only god image ever painted on rock, carved in stone, or sculpted in clay, from the upper Paleolithic to the middle Neolithic, and that's roughly 30,000 years, was the image of a human female, Monica Shu, the great cosmic mother.
Yeah, so we'll come back to this one, but it sets an important first slide, because what is this thing about 30,000 years ago? It's also about 40,000. She could have said 40, but somewhere between 30 and 40,000, something very odd happened. That's why they got these figurines. But also this thing about the time sticks. These were discovered in the back of caves, and they've been discovered in other places. Little pebbles with marks on it. And then, as I told you, these bison horns that were already in the shape of a crescent with little markings on them that also turned out to be the 29-day cycle of the moon. And so these were all in the keeping of women. So that doesn't happen overnight, that you start doing this. Also, you have to have a reason. And when you stand back, agriculture and these things, have been going on for a long time. What is the whole point of this? And then they found out that women played a big role in agriculture because, as we mentioned before, the picking of herbs is a highly meticulous thing. So then modern scholars started to question what it's all about, and they came up with their various ideas. We don't need to really dwell on those. But the point is that this happened, and it turned out that women were the first, measurers. In fact, the word menses and menstruation and mens, which also means mind, comes from the word to measure. The word calendar comes from an old word meaning to measure. If you take out, the word for menses and almost all of the different languages, it all comes back to the English word measure, measuring, even matter, material, right? And geomancy, Gaia, is a measurement of the earth. Gaia. Geometry is measurement of the earth. And it turns out that women were involved in this. So they were looking up to the luminaries. And of course, a day is too short a time, and a year is a very long period of time. But a month seems to be really something you can get your mind around, and is also turns out to be quite uniform in this 28, 29, 30-day period. And we find out then that the women really understood that there was a strange connection between this bleeding period, one to the other, in terms of a lunar cycle. Something that men could have lived for millions of years and never bothered ever noticing, you see. So then this is one aspect, but we'll come back to it. Anyway, let's move on.
The women, who according to some authorities invented agriculture, did so because only they had the secret of the strong fertility of the seed corn. The reason for this was that originally women mixed the seed corn with menstrual blood, which was the best possible fertilizer before planting it. Uterine blood would be a very potent drag for laying scent trails. This might have figured in the development of hunting disciplines. Huntresses could use their powerfully magic menstrual blood as a trail. Dragged on an ambush track, Artemis, the goddess of the new moon, was also the patroness of hunters. Shuttle and Redgrove, the wise wound.
Right. So how many people know this? That women were in there at the beginning, not just hunter-gatherers, but the actual expert hunters, using their own blood as trails to capture animals. I don't think that's in the imagination of a lot of people when they think back, just how active women were in terms of this. And if you're a really, really good hunter, proficient, like really up there, then not only are you very adept at being able to kill animals, you might be very good at killing human beings, meaning a good fighter in war. Well, you only have to read the Celtic legends to know that that's 100% true. And Norse legends are always talking about the fighting women, and it was a virtue amongst the old Celtic women. And they never would also allow their men to get overweight. They wouldn't marry them. They wouldn't have sex with their overweight men, because the women were the keepers of the sword, the keepers of, and this is shown in mythology. So there's bravado involved here. There's cunning involved here. There's martial skill. Are we thinking about that when we think about samurai and Robin Hood and all? No, of course not. Or King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, you see? So automatically, that one slide there just shows you, wait a minute, I would have to really adapt. But Hollywood seems to know what you don't know, with all these Xena warriors and Tomb Raiders and whatever else you've got, and the pop videos showing these high-kicking martial art women dancing, prancing around like Beyonce and all. Somebody knows something. And all the blood and guts of these videos, and the woman riding the lion and coiling with a serpent. What do most people think? What do most teenage girls think when they see all of that? It's just entertainment? Do they know that they're being atavistically worked on in the limbic areas of their brain? Hell no. This is really, really fascinating, because the women bled. And if people have remembered my series on slavery, the Dead Sea Scrolls deception, John Allegro was of the opinion that the blood was also spread under the fir trees where the mushrooms grew, and that, where the psilocybin grew, and that this was a very elaborate ritual performed again at key parts of the lunar cycle, but even at there were certain priestesses who were adorned to do it at other times. So we're way into this psychotropic cult here. And the symbolism of great artwork proves it. But you wouldn't know what you're looking at. But I've written 2 books on that called The Trees of Life, and it has over 700 pictures in it, color plates. If people went and looked at it, they'd certainly now know what we're talking about. This was well known to the underground stream. people in the Hermetic traditions and the goddess traditions of the past, what I've just said about this cultivation of the mushroom and the elaborate ritual where a tent or a pavilion was built, in the forest and at the time of the menses, and all sorts of rituals would then happen by night with only women present. And then when the mushrooms grew, they were cultivated. And of course, then later eaten, powdered, whatever you want, mixed even with other substances. The thing was incredibly elaborate and was mostly in the hands, not entirely, depending on the culture you're in, but a great deal of it ended up in the hands of the women cults, actually. It's so much so that the leaders of these rites and rituals, be they the Eleusinian or the Phrygian or the Dionysian myths, mostly it was women, archimandrites, that ran the shop. Some of them, so much so that we saw before, they didn't even allow men. And if men did appear, they had to be dressed as women.
Mm.
Another thing that was known in the ancient Celtic world. But let's go on.
It is quite possible that Malta and Gozo were schools for priestesses. Such island schools are common in legend. Ancient Celtic myth tells of sacred islands inhabited and ruled by women, where mysteries were kept and taught. Monica Shu, the Great Cosmic Mother.
Yeah, so this is where, you would trust more mythology than what came later with the 20th century historians. They talk about worldwide matriarchy. Maybe they got that wrong. They had these locations, like there was just been mentioned in that slide, here and there in the Mediterranean, in the world, right? Mostly these sort of lonely islands where the gynocracy, the sisterhood, accepted students, high initiates, that would be sent there. Maybe some young girls and whatever. But that's not a matriarchy. So maybe a couple of pages got turned here at once. Right? You did have cultic centers at Knossos and Crete and Sardinia and Ephesus, and other places I could mention all over the Levant, and probably even over in the in the West as well. No doubt about that, in islands that are maybe some of them even lost right now. But let's understand that that is kind of substantiated by some of the great Celtic scholars, by the way. So the thing is that's what you absolutely get in terms of, the Celtic legends. So it's not that there was a matriarchy. That gives you a kind of a wrong impression, probably by design. No, there were these mystery centers where certain women from certain tribes could be sent to learn these great mysteries and then come back into the tribes. That's the way more I would look at it. The wise ones. But whether some universal matriarchy existed in the way some of these men with a female bias want you to believe, that has been knocked on the head. Remember I sent you that video? I hope you saw it.
Yes, I watched it a few times, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, you see, this is an amazing video that shows that by the time the 1970s came, some of the fraud started to be exposed. And anyway, if we link up to that video, other people can see it too. So let's move on.
Women converted plants and herbs into medicines. Some substances discovered by women are still used today for their narcotic properties. And World Health Organization figures show that 95% of the world's healthcare today is still provided by women using many of these ancient remedies. Monica Shu, the Great Cosmic Mother.
Yes, and she's right. And this goes, remember Paracelsus? Last week we saw everything I learned came from it. The greatest healer that's ever been known, along with these other guys, these Galens and whatever. Look, hold on, right? So here's it proven again. The stats show you that the woman in the horticulture, the woman in herbalism, and the woman in these more specific drugs, which had medicinal properties, were now being involved. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that they first administered this to themselves. This was, as we said last week, and as the writers of the Wise Wound book will definitely confirm, this was done for the health and hygiene of the woman herself during times of pregnancy and during times of the menstruation. So there's no complication there. And later on, it spread out, to other members of the tribes. But let's move on to the next slide.
Plant-gathering women would be involved in highly detailed tabulations of various plants and herbal properties. What is edible, what is poison, what is medicinal, what is hallucinogenic. And in transferring this information onto others over generations, an incredibly complex and replete botanic and pharmacopoeia catalog would be filed in each female mind. Monica Shu, the Great Cosmic Mother.
That's right. This is very, very key. Now, when you're biased, you're going to celebrate this. You're going to want to run out into the streets and say, see, our thesis is to exalt women and to glorify them. They're not just the birth givers, but here we have found an incredible fact about ancient history. And you know something? They're right. But the one thing that the biased mind always overlooks is how that very same information could be misused. In their hurry, because the general theme is, and people should know this by now, they really should. The general theme is the more that these people exalt the woman, it comes hand in hand with the denigration of the male. So at any given point where somebody like myself would stop and say, ooh, that's an interesting passage, but I can see where, I put my Sherlock Holmes hat on, I can see where the negative enters in here, because this same knowledge could be misused. If I said that of any male figure, they go, oh, well, very unbiased there, Michael. Of course, yes. All knowledge can be abused. But that's never the case. No scholar out there, except completely inadvertently, ever does that. And here's an example. So yes, you should praise this fact. It is a hell of a science to know these things. To know if you eat this berry, you're going to be in agony, dying, of poison. You're not going to feed this to the animals. You're not going to feed it to your children. You're not going to feed it to anybody. All of this is very valuable knowledge, and especially the stuff about the hallucinogenics. But doesn't anyone ever acknowledge the fact that all power can be misused? Well, we don't, because of this blanket projection on womankind and the total and utter suppression of this black book of the criminal history of womankind. And that the only criminal history you're ever going to know about, you see, is the male one, in the haste, because you're not going to hasten to say that any and all things that went bad in the world, it will be the man that starts to abuse it. But I'm here to tell you, no, it's not. Far from the case. But let's go on.
According to Merlin Stone, snake venom injected into people who have been previously immunized against it has highly hallucinogenic qualities. Some venom is chemically similar to mescaline, peyote, or the psilocybin of mushrooms. Reported effects were clairvoyance, extraordinary mental powers, enhanced creativity, prophetic visions, and illumination about the primal processes of existence. We can be sure the ancient women shamans worldwide were aware of this property of snake venom. Monica Shu, the Great Cosmic Mother.
Yeah, now I don't know about you, but that makes my skin crawl. It's one of those things about ancient times, the Neolithic, that just makes my skin crawl. You're dealing with a hell of a process there. Sure enough, somebody could have found out about it accidentally by being bitten by a snake. So that's not any kind of mystery, or there's no puzzle about that. But there sure is a puzzle to go, and who wanted to weaponize that? After something like that happened, when you know that most of the cases where it happened, the person probably died or was in a state of total agony, right? Who would want then to start experimenting with this over a long period of time? What they call immunization. This means giving snake poison. Ever been bitten by a mosquito? Ever had a little touch of malaria, let alone been bitten by a cobra? What are we talking about here? Who would even want to dabble in this? Couldn't you find something else to do? There's a whole pharmacopoeia of healing herbs out there that'll solve anything. You don't need to be going after and catching those snakes and milking their venom, and then administering it to people to check what it's going to do. only to find out later on that it gives you these amazing visions. And then you would, okay, we're into Darwin, right? Yeah. All right, Darwin. What the hell has this got to do with anything to do with survival? In fact, if I'm spaced out or my whole culture is spaced out, I would say that's got to be about the most disastrous thing when it comes to our survival. When again, the whole image of the whole wide world is everybody sitting there wide-eyed, scared shitless, looking at their doorways, wondering when they're going to be attacked by an animal. Well, we've already said that the women can handle all of that better than the men. And we're expert hunters. What? And now we find out they're out there catching poisonous snakes in order to gain, open laboratories and work on how does this affect me? If that doesn't shatter your reality, I don't know what does. That is extremely fucking dangerous. Okay? It's lethal almost when it turns up in the snake dances of the Native American Indians. That'll make your skin crawl. What we're talking about here is even more so. This stuff was administered over long periods of time to certain types. And who chose those poor Judas goats? Right? Who selected which young child was going to be subjected to this? They're being slowly, poisoned with snake venom so that they would then have these hallucinations. I've done a podcast on a slave called the Shamanism Fraud. It's a couple of years back. People should watch that.
Yeah, remember that one.
Yeah. But my God, what are we talking about here? Well, let's go on and we'll find out.
Everywhere in world myth and imagery, the goddess creatrix was coupled with the sacred serpent. In Egypt, she was the cobra goddess. The use of the cobra in her ceremonies and icons was so ancient that the inscribed picture of a cobra preceded the names of all goddesses and became the hieroglyphic sign for the word goddess, Monica Shu, the great cosmic mother.
Yeah. Now I know what this means. We've only got 2 slides, and it encompasses thousands of years of development from the Paleolithic and God knows even before. Every goddess name in Egypt was preceded by a cobra. And in fact, what it really boils down to is that the word woman was symbolized by the cobra. You had the cobra symbol and it meant woman in the hieroglyphics. How did those 2 things become associated? The previous slide tells you. They were the serpent priestesses, the serpent sisterhood, as I call them. And they were immensely powerful. Anyone who knows my work knows this is the original secret society of all secret societies, later known as the Order of Tsarion, but in the early days they were called the Great Royal Wives of Egypt. And their story, I tell, in the Irish Origins work and other work, like Female Illuminati. And they haven't gone anywhere. These are the people who gave the charters to all the other male secret societies, which is why the male societies always have the female symbolism, after they've opened. Or something related to that, like the Masons are using the castration symbols, because they're the castrati, they're the Galli, they're the eunuchs in service of the goddess, as most religion is. And even the most uber conservative 5th sect still wanted you to know that the goddess traditions was behind them. That's why they wear all what they do. Again, turn to my work and people will see. The word cardinal comes from Cardia. She was a goddess. Look up the word Cardia, goddess. It's just unbelievable, right? But this connection today, when you open ad copy, when you look on billboards, when you look on these ridiculous pop videos, that's all you see is the girl with a python or a serpent. Natalie Portman, Beyonce, this fucking, what was her name? Britney Spears, right? All of it. Sickening. Yeah. This Abramovich. Look, you see, we've got to understand, there ain't nothing positive about this. Our society cannot tell evil anymore, even when it's staring you in the face. but let's go on.
At least 2,000 years before the Hebrew patriarchs wrote of the Garden of Eden, the Neolithic Greek goddess had her magic garden of immortality. Monica Shu, the great cosmic mother.
Yeah, remember I told you there's so much to get into, right? Here's the story of the garden. This was always the precinct of the goddess. Always. And you could follow that trail alone for years to get into it. The word for garden was paradiso. So the word paradise means a walled garden, enclosed, sanctum. And it was known in the most ancient Aryan traditions. These islands that we talked about, they were also considered that. They were almost considered, sanctuaries, gardens, paradisical places. That's where Avalon comes from. That's where the Garden of Hesperides comes from, and many others that you could mention. It always has this paradisical aspect, but then there's always the central tree or trees and the guardian serpent. And when you bring all these kinds of myths together, you will find that by and large, the serpent is a guardian. There's not evil. But of course, we also have the garden in the book of Genesis. It didn't originate there. And a story comes from Mesopotamia, and they got it from Turkey, which was once a very high Aryan civilization. We had a goddess called Ifa, and she had a sacred garden that nobody was allowed into, and you had the serpent, the guardian pet serpent, and the trees, and also these herbs, you see, because the herbs are the sacred to the goddess. They're hers. And so you'll keep seeing this motif even in classical art. Or you'll hear references to the goddess and her bower, like we saw last time, and the goddess of the branch. And if you read my books, The Trees of Life, you'll keep seeing this image of the goddess holding the branch bearer. It was just a simple matter of her who wielded the mistletoe, she who wielded the sacred ivy or whatever it was, the hallucinogenic plant. So when you see the serpent, most scholars accept that means woman, but what they don't tell you is it had to do with the venom of the serpent. That's the missing piece. The serpent and the woman come together because of the hallucinogenic properties of the venom of certain reptiles, that they kept. Now, today, any oceanographer knows fine well that reptiles, especially these little enemies or from these urchins, from beneath the sea. It's well known, right? Contain incredible poisons. But do they know that this was already known thousands of years ago, and it was the women who knew all about it? The piscine world and the serpent, the reptoid world, the reptile world, and what to make of it, and what to do with it, and how to administer it. And what we're trying to say here is that is power. Now, this is a power that has never been brought to light in the mainstream as being something that was history building. And it's never brought to light when anyone's looking back at the history of womankind. In the history of the histories of women's oppression and all of these things. It's just not known in the West. It never was brought into the West. You got to go digging for it. But let's go on.
Sure. Yeah, I've not heard of it until you've brought it up. I mean, obviously you have quotes here from scholars who have been studying this, but it's not exactly in the mainstream narrative, that's for sure.
No, it definitely is not. Although I must say, let me just make one more comment. Like when you look at the Starbucks logo, it has the female on it, right? And you're drinking this black elixir that everybody's addicted to. It's right there in your hand. But you have no idea of the history of what you're doing. You see how it works? Yep, it's all there, but it's in plain view, hidden in plain view. Yeah, sorry, let's go on.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was just thinking, though, I would imagine, I wanted to ask questions at the end, but I might forget this one.
Oh, go ahead.
Just it seems quite a bit easier if you want to herd a culture of humans to work through them atavistically rather than overtly with an iron fist. So we see this female covert tactic, as you mentioned, even with Starbucks, which, has contracts with companies like Nestle, who have openly stated that they don't believe water is a human right, and engage in child slavery to procure materials to make their chocolate. I mean, so it's just interesting because that's just one layer of, it sounds like many, many layers that go quite deep and go quite far back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, these are satanic groups. I mean, isn't that obvious to people? The Nestle's using the symbol for the Scottish Rite double cross,
Mm.
of the Exxons. I've gone into that. And Starbucks, no better. These are Sabbateans, Frankists, all the way. And they had billions from selling drugs from way back at the time of the Zealots and the Essenes and the Sicarii. They didn't go away. These were assassins from the day they were born. And afterwards, they were criminal organizations back then. The Romans dealt with them, but they went underground. And they went into all these substances that we would know today, coffee being part of it, a minor part of it, but they pop up later now again. But you'd be amazed at what's behind these exact companies that you mentioned. They may be selling something that looks like semi-benign now. It's only mildly addictive now. But these are experts. If you look at my first book, and Atlantis, and go back to the appendix section, you'll soon find out what's been going on with many substances, including sugar and drugs. It's absolutely an amazing story. I had to put a whole appendix in my own book. The first book was swollen because I had to add this chronology that fascinates, right from day one, to let you know just how patient these people are and what connections they've had. But yeah, let's go on.
Ancient women withdrew during their menstrual periods to meditate, fast, pray, and communicate with her. Women living together in cooperative groups do begin to coordinate the time of their periods. Ancient women bled and meditated together under the bleeding and meditating moon. There is no doubt that all ancient religious experience was associated with, if it did not originate in, hallucinogenic experience, and that this was under the tutelage of women, the great Stone Age pharmacologists. Monica Shue, the Great Cosmic Mother.
Absolutely extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. So they were using it on themselves, probably for thousands of years before they let the secret out to others. And that only came very gradually. And then, as I hinted last week, they started to administer it to special children, their sons. Of course, their daughters, that was no doubt about that. But finally, they decided to cross the sex barrier and started giving it to their sons. And the reasons for that are elaborate, but we'll limit it to saying that, you see, in those days, the women kept the secret of paternity from their husbands. And also, even despite that, there was this belief that their sons were the progeny of the ancestors. That if you were born, it was because the wife, the woman, had been impregnated by an ancestor spirit, through a dream or any other number of ways, right? And if you're on this hallucinogenic stuff yourself, day, morning, noon, and night, this is the kind of thought. Well, first of all, this thought might come to you when you're on these psychotropics. When you're on these psychotropics, this is the kind of information that you start getting. Doesn't mean it's real, but this is what you start, manifesting even back then. But even if the thought had come to you because it was part of your culture, the moment that you go on these psychotropics, the more ideas like that get, reinforced. So the children could be put on it because the idea was you are already from the dead. A dead soul of an ancestor is in you. So you need to connect with that. You're special. You are the son of, say, a dead king or a dead patriarch or a beloved, warrior from the past. And they really, really believed this. So that to them, if you took the drug, it's more likely that the child growing up on it will go, yeah, I am. The whole thing is what we would now call mind control. I'm not a person who's going to sit here and tell you that any of those visions that they're receiving are true any more than the ones that you get down in the jungle today. I'm just not going to go that far. You might find somebody else who'll tell you opposite. Somebody's read a lot of Carlos Castaneda. Yeah, not me. Not me. Never will you convince me. That's just a personal peccadillo. I'm just not sold to that idea.
Fair.
This thing is screwy from the start, and is as screwy today as it was back then. Go ahead.
Blood was used in the Delphic shrine to feed the ghosts and make them return, to speak in prophecy through the Sibyl. The Sibyl drank the blood, producing in herself prophetic ecstasy. In a Neolithic cave located in Sacromonte, Spain, 13 skeletons, all in priestess dress and holding amulet bundles, were found. They sat in a circle and apparently had participated in a ritual death. The floor was strewn with beads and seeds of the opium poppy. Monica Shu, the Great Cosmic Mother.
Yeah. Wow. 13 women in ritual dress found dead after some sort of rite which involved, the psychotropics. Now, my guess is that they were probably crones who were in their old age, and this was a sacrifice to the goddess. Could be wrong. Could have been something else that was going on. But in any case, this is pretty dire, pretty foul. You see? The whole thing. So, because what this means in a nutshell, in the last couple of slides, is that this is the origin of the occult. We can cut the whole thing down short to say, this is where the occult begins. Not with men, but with women. They invented it. They invented it. And this would include astrology, because haven't we already said that the measurement of the luminaries begins with this?
Yes.
Yeah. Of course, you'd have to tie in your Julian Janes. It's more elaborate than what I'm talking about. But on the whole, this mixture of this fantasization, the experiences that you have hallucinogenically on the drugs, the talking to ancestors, the familiars with animal spirits, right? The dark caves, the whole shebang of it, right? And all sorts of other bizarre, the drinking of blood, that will attract ghosts. Okay, I don't know what this tells you. This is not good. And it has absolutely nothing to do with Darwinian survival.
No,
You're not
it
going to
doesn't
make
sound
any
like it.
case. Huh?
I said not. It doesn't sound like Darwinian survival at all.
No,
I was just
these are
laughing.
rites and rituals. They're rites and rituals which are largely unnecessary. Planting seeds in the ground to cultivate, plants to eat and to, administer to health, yeah, perfectly necessary. This stuff, not necessary. This is all conjured by the human mind. It brings in the supernatural, as this slide points out. And so there's no telling where it's going to go. And what I'm insisting upon is that it will go in a very dark direction. It's bound to, as we know the occult did go in a bad direction. But it's not under the auspices of any men. This is entirely something that's in the power of women for thousands of years. And anyone who knows your John Allegros and things about the love feasts that we talked about, in the show on the Dead Sea Scrolls Deception on Enslaved, and much of my other work on the female Illuminati, this is where they're getting their power. It's one of the places. And it is an absolute obscenity that this has never been factored in. Even many of the men who write about this, who are experts talking about pharmacology, the pharmacopoeia, never mentioned the women, except and again in a very highly positive light, because they themselves are moderns who have never even considered what we're talking about here. But let's go on, please.
Anthropologist Jacetta Hawkes also believes that the ecstatic mystery religion of Dionysus, the tender-faced and curly-haired son of the Cretan Great Mother, was originally the cult of the great goddess herself and her wild orgiastic women. The goddess of Crete wears 3 opium poppy seeds on her head. Monica Shu, the Great Cosmic Mother.
Yeah. So she's the fertility goddess. Dionysus is the soft-faced child lover. But he's also the sacrificial. He's god of wine, god of ecstasy. You see how it all works? Comes from the mothers. And then the child is just an extension of her will. and he's there to be sacrificed. So he represents a kind of a phallic principle, but in a kind of an odd way. We're talking now about the role of the masculine, but we have another false picture about that too, which has also been generated over time cunningly, right, by these feminists and other authors who've cunningly made us think of the phallocratic and the patristic in a certain, false way. And once that false picture has been installed in your head, it'll be minus all the information we're talking about here. But once it's been installed in your head, it's very, very difficult to get rid of it. And it's been designed to infect female students as soon as they get into school, even at a very young age. But let's go on.
Sure.
Other forms of ecstatic dancing came down to us from the Near East, Thrace, the Mediterranean, preserved in Greek legend. One of these is the ecstatic dance of the Bacchantes, wild women intoxicated by chewing ivy leaves, and also the mushroom, sacred to Dionysus. The Bacchantes, or Thracian Maenads, mad women, were the daughters of the Great Mother, her white wild maids. Monacheshu, the Great Cosmic Mother.
Yeah, unbelievable. So here we have entire rites, Dionysian rites. They've taken the name of the child. And this is important because the chalice of wine is the cup of Dionysus, but that's the sacred mushroom. Right? The Amanita muscaria is the mushroom that was then transfigured into the cup of Christ. Iacchus, Bacchus, Giacchus, right? All the scholars know what you're talking about. And in my Trees of Life book, I show all the paintings that show you that Jesus and Dionysus are one. Yeah. And they let it slip in Judaism that the original name of Yahweh is Adonai. There's your Adon again, Don, Dionysus, Don, Donar, Adonis, and Adonai. They're all going back to these fertility gods. But then they were a little bit sanitized, bleached later on to come up with something more patristic. But they all originate with these earlier cults. And the wild dancing is all part of this eating of the hallucinogenic plants. But it turned dark very, very quickly, as the myths always talk about, where animals were torn to pieces, sacrificial animals, and then finally even, sacrificial human beings were used, as sort of scapegoats for the sins of the community. It was really something horrific. And I go into that in my Monstrous Feminine videos. Okay, let's go on.
The cult of Dionysus and the wild women was popular with the common people, especially those in the countryside far into Roman times. Central to this cult were the ancient mushroom mysteries, the communal eating of hallucinogenic psilocybin called the body of Dionysus. In Cretan myth, Dionysus was the bisexual son of the mother, raised as a girl among women. Monacheshu, the Great Cosmic Mother.
Well, well, well. The bisexual son of the goddess raised as a girl. What do we see in a world today?
Yeah.
I've said from day one in my career that there ain't nothing about ancient history that is in my work that's interesting in and of itself. Everything I do is to explain what the hell is going on today. I've made this statement over and over again. People just yawn. Who are these Dionysians today? We call them hipsters. We call them millennials. We call them transsexuals. It's all back because women have been gaining more and more of this atavistic power since the feminism began.
Yeah.
So you either see it and then you say yourself, the veil is down. I'm not under the mind control, or you're under the mind control. And you can just join the merry party and be pipered all the way into fucking, hell. But let's go on.
Dark Diana of the Romans, goddess of the witches, wore a necklace of testicles echoing the castration nature of Kali, and the Gorgon Medusa, her magic hair composed of writhing snakes, petrified all who looked at her into rigidity and death, into stone. Monacheshu, the great cosmic mother.
Yeah. So what's positive about any of that? This is a dark goddess. They're never going to mention it. They're never going to find the origins of evil in any of this. And that means that they're servants of evil themselves. When they write about this and make that level of an oversight, then they have to be categorized as evil themselves, which most of these feminists are. Their belief systems are evil because they cannot see it. These ancient female cults were absolutely evil. They invented the occult. They invented this out-of-body experience. And there they are talking about that it was collective. This was done in larger groups, very quick. You see? Well, it's done in larger groups today. And it is, whether you realize it or not, a very woman-centered, organization. And if there are men attached to it, they're about as feminized as you can get. Look at these Eckhart Tolles and Deepak Chopras and what have you. And many, many more endorsing. They'll try to tell you that there's a healing, patterns involved when you go down and take this ayahuasca or any of these other drugs. This is how they seduce you. Is that right? Who pays their bills? Where did they even come from? Who are these Rhonda Byrnes? People don't know anything what you're talking about. They just see it in the bookstore window. They heard about it's real popular, and they just line up like a bunch of gormless wallies, shelling out money for this tripe. And they don't even know, if it's covered in symbolism, where that symbolism even comes from and what it's all about. It's the same thing with the pop videos. And they don't even question why some of this imagery is so seductive to people. But let's go on.
Among the Greeks, the goddess of the dark moon was Hecate. She was queen of ghosts and of the crossroads, where many midnight rituals took place. Hecate was the destroyer. Newborn children and animals were sacrificed to her. She was the giver of rain, as well as harvest storms. The dead are especially sacred to the goddess since they directly partake of her being, spirits awaiting rebirth through her physical manifestations. Monica Shu, the great cosmic mother. All lovers of mother goddesses have certain features in common. They are all youths whose beauty and loveliness are as striking as their narcissism. They are delicate blossoms symbolized by the myths as anemones, narcissi, hyacinths, or violets, which we, with our markedly masculine patriarchal mentality, would more readily associate with young girls. The only thing we can say about these youths, whatever their names may be, is that they please the amorous goddess by their physical beauty. Apart from that, they are, in contrast to the heroic figures of mythology, devoid of strength and character, lacking all individuality and initiative. Erich Neumann, Origins and History of Consciousness.
Yeah, we call them hipsters. We call them millennials. They are not gone. This is not something of ancient history. Can you read the next one? These soy boys.
Yes, very pretty.
Mm-hmm.
All these youths, with their weak egos and no personality, only have a collective fate, not a fate of their own. They are not yet individuals, and so they have no individual existence, only a ritual one. Erich Neumann, Origins and History of Consciousness.
Yeah. So there you have it. This is not ancient history. This is what you get when women take charge of the world order. They bring with them who they are and what they've been into in history. They bring it back in the form of childbirth, in the form of the motives, in what they have known, gained them power in the days of old. That's why they can be outside lighting black candles and skinning and, reading entrails outside Trump Tower in total view of all the cameras in today's world and all the other shenanigans that they're up to. Now, later, obviously, things get complicated more because this knowledge of the psychotropics and the entheogens did start percolating out into the general population, and men started to learn it too. So the things that we're looking at today did in fact get forgotten. But that served the cause of the feminists. Oh, good. That's all blurred over. The wind is blown, the dust is gathered, you see, and some debris has covered over this actual history. Well, that's good. That serves us well. And what man is going to go start reading, all of these women's studies books to find out what the hell went on? Or go back to the bibliographies and the citations, in the back of a massive tome and look it up to find out. And many of the men who are scholarly who did were already professionally assassinated. The average Joe is never going to come across their names, and certainly never going to put it all together like we're doing right now. But remember, the first slide was about this period 40,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago, where she talked about the fact that this was where you get carvings and images of the goddess. And I said we'd leave that for a minute. That's right, because you see, I also believe that it was about 40,000 years ago that something very remarkable happened to the human race. After millennia, hundreds and hundreds of thousands, even millions of years, right? It was about 3.5 million years that they found evidence that man was standing on 2 feet. And nobody in the world can explain why that happened. Why females came down from the trees. All these things that happened that are completely opposite to the Darwinian, move for survival. Mm-hmm. Women with cubs in their hands, little children in their arms, come down from the safety of the trees and start walking about on 2 feet. And men did the same? No, sorry. Inexplicable to any Darwinist today. No matter how they force it, it just doesn't make sense, given their own paradigm. See, if you step outside their paradigm, yeah, okay, then we're on a different field and we can have some different insights. But once you stuck into the Darwinian paradigm, some of this stuff cannot be answered. But then suddenly, 40,000 years ago, that was just a blink of the eye, we have artwork for the very first time. Man became an artist. You have nothing before, except a few chips and scrapes on bone. And then about 40,000 years ago, you get cave paintings, some of them very elaborate, and the whole thing begins. And nobody has the faintest idea how this happened or why. Isn't it remarkable? Why would you want to paint pictures? What's motivating you to do that? And how come it just starts up 40,000 years ago, all of a sudden? And the answers that some of these, scholars give is really rather preposterous, if not fully contradictory. Because again, they're trying to leave out as much as they put in. The answer is this: what we're talking about. This is the time when the men were started to be administered these potions. First, the women had done it, but they went into rituals. They went into these mad ecstatic dances, right? Maybe played some wild music. And like I said, performed these sort of more rites and rituals. But they weren't necessarily artistic to that degree. But when man started taking these substances, it opened up what we would now call his feminine side.
Yes.
Because there's nothing else on the planet that would open up his feminine side. Sex certainly wasn't part of it. Intimacy with women, no, sorry, that doesn't work. See, all the things I told you that they try to... No, that doesn't work. Man was a hunter. Man was a pretty rough and ready being who had plenty on his hands when it came to delivering the meat and fighting off enemies and fighting off animals. It was horrific. Sitting down playing the lyre and composing poetry and going into dark caves at night and painting elaborate, images of the hunt or whatever. It just, no, something's not right here. Something is coming from left field. So this becomes more important than we can know, because the opening of this feminine side was not directly to do with the proximity of women. It was to do with them now being exposed to a power that women had been reserving for themselves and their children. That's my theory. Yeah. And some men are into it, and some just are not, right? Even with the psychotropics, it doesn't do anything for me. Give me a headache. Don't like it. So the beginning of the occult and the beginning of this very, very well noted change in mentality. See, nothing happened in the brain. They know that anatomically speaking, 40,000 years ago, man was exactly the same as he had been for 1,000,000 years before that. So there was no other biological anatomical change that should have made him into a bloody artist that they can look at. Remember, we're talking from that they're stuck within their paradigm, right? But I'm talking from that point of view. But by being stuck within that paradigm, that's when they're left with a mystery, same as they are today. They've never worked out to drop the paradigm. That never occurs to anybody, right? And if you do, you're immediately a dissenter. Okay, we got to get rid of you. So women would love to be able to say that something happened to men, that opened up their feminine side, and that's due to us because we always had that side open as well. No, it's bogus. It's just that it was nothing to do with you in that sense. It had to do with this phenomena that men were only exposed to later on because this was always in the keeping of the female cults. And it was only later on, somewhere about 30 to 40,000 years ago, that leaked out. See, don't forget it was bound to leak out at some point because the sons themselves, when they were young, and the daughters had been exposed to these substances. So when they grew up, it's quite natural that at some point they're going to say, no, I want it for other men too. You can't keep a secret forever like this. It's just not possible for that long. And other things may have also come about to exacerbate it. But one way or the other, this is something to bear in mind. Because women would love to take, the responsibility for this. But why I'm bringing all of this up is because the feminists have a major problem on their hands once these facts are contemplated. Because by their own calendar, by their own historical analysis, man, the misogynist, right? The man, the patristic, paternalistic enemy of woman, with his world tilted towards misogyny, is happening, somewhere around 4,000 years ago. They date this because they know about the patriarchs of the Old Testament, Okay, but the fact is, how then can you reconcile these two things? How can man become more and more artistic down through these exact same times and become more misogynistic so that it's such a problem for women at the same time? Because when we say got more artistic, by their own words, as I've just shown, they mean more feminine. Right. So Captain Kirk gets up and says, question for God. How can you at the same time, in the same period of history, claim that man is opening his feminine side for the first time and becoming this remarkable artist with no antecedent inclination to do so? And he's becoming more and more open to his feminine side, but he's also becoming more and more misogynistic so that it becomes a major bugbear for women, a major catastrophe for women at exactly the same time. This is your philosophy? This is your paradigm? Deer in the headlight moment. What do? Close up shop and disappear, and they never addressed this. The feminists just didn't bother answering back. The raucous applause, and they just quickly pushed this under the rug. It is absolutely inexplicable given their own teachings. But you'll never hear about it. Probably what we're talking about right now is the first time it's ever been spoken on the internet. This glaring contradiction. We've spoken of others, in the previous programs. We had one, the struggle. The man first learns how to kick and scream and be violent only because of the tug of the terrible mother holding him from what is completely natural and organic. That means that he learns violence and aggression and destructiveness secondarily. It is not inherent to his personality. Why would people with triple PhDs didn't bother telling you that? Just overlooked that fact? Wouldn't you think that would be important in the study of crime? And since what you've done to indict men and to put them through the ringer, to put them through absolute living hell with your accusations, but you just happen to leave that little point out? And this is actually amounts to nothing more than basic Freudianism? You don't have to go on a safari like Indiana Jones through the jungles to find this piece of fact. This is absolutely doggerel for the Freudian. But we know what happened to Freudianism in America, don't we? Wonder why? You see, the things were all in plain sight. All these facts were in plain sight. Nothing was hidden, except duplicitously.
Yeah. I have a question actually, if it's all right
Well,
to.
yeah, please.
Okay. Oh, it may be a very basic question, but I just wonder if other people who are listening may be asking, why do you think there is, I mean, I know you've been explaining it throughout this series, so the pieces are coming together, but I wonder if in a statement or two you would be able to answer, like, why are scholars pushing this under the rug? Why are they so vehement to deny it and even attack the messenger when someone comes out with this type of information or even has questions that might allude that this is the direction that the answer would lie?
Well, they've always hated mavericks. And these institutions and establishments are not about knowledge. They're about indoctrination and mind control. And they always have been like that. If it wasn't the case, then don't you think that Wilhelm Reich, statues of him would be in every city today?
Yeah.
Don't you think that Immanuel Velikovsky, statues would be in every city? But we've got Einstein and Carl Sagan and more bullshit than you can imagine up to our eyeballs. Yeah, look what they do to dissenters from within their own establishment. That should tell you everything. This is a horrendous organization. All these universities are a scandal. Everyone knows that they're a scandal. And they want to territorialize knowledge. None of the great thinkers ever wanted to do that. But the institutions that they gave rise to or that started to come up, they are draconian to that degree. And they want to push. They are the tyrant who, instead of being able to rise themselves, feel high by pushing everybody else down. So if you come in there and you're sensitive and intelligent and introspective and truly studious, they don't want you. They want obedient workers and people who will jump through hoops and never question. And they can get it too. They'll just bypass your ass. Go, oh, how dare you? Get out of here. Off you go. We can replace you with 10,000 gormless twats. And then, of course, we have the movement, the actual Marcusan industry to make sure that only critical theorists, were put in the positions of power through what we're known as the long march through the institutions.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. They're not even hiding it. They're telling us to their faces this is what they did based on, some old neo-Marxist mandates. And that worked incredibly well. It was very, very easy for them to vet. But coming back to this point, I wanted to mention, in this, you get another phenomena, and that is that the woman, well, actually, let's hold off on that till we've read the next. Is there one more slide to go, or how many?
We have two left.
Yeah, let's read those, why don't we?
An essential characteristic of this adolescent ego stage is that the female, under the aspect of the Great Mother, is experienced as having a negative fascination. Two features are especially common and well marked. The first is the bloody and savage nature of the Great Mother Goddess. The second is her power as a sorceress and a witch. Worshipped from Egypt to India, from Greece and Asia Minor to darkest Africa, the Great Mother was always regarded as a goddess of the chase and of war. Her rites were bloody, her festivals orgiastic. All these features are essentially interconnected. This blood layer deep down in the Great Earth Mother only makes it more understandable why the youths she loves should fear castration. Erich Newman, Origins and History of Consciousness.
Right. What the hell is good about that? This is a tyrannical power. This is a power that then breeds fear and death. It's right there. The feminists are admitting it themselves, gloating it. Despite themselves, they have to write about it. This is a chthonic mother wielding the tyranny of beauty. This is pure tyranny. I have to fear castration? You know, we've talked a lot, remember before, about the terrible mother in the early days of youth, and how she's an enemy of freedom, holding one back. Here it is. Here it is on a different level. Here now it is speaking historically and culturally. But every woman embodies this dark goddess, this dark anima, this lower anima. What are they doing about it? They're giving in to it.
Yeah.
Parenting for a woman is the beginning of this. Their dreams are deeper, right? When they're going through their menstruation, they have extraordinary experiences. Doesn't this teach them something? No, they go and get medicated against it or whatever it might be.
Exactly.
Or they just ignore it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
just ignore it. They don't know the churning forces within them. And they're looking for evil in some, Bela Lugosi moment. Some other fiasco. It's over the hill. It's down at the movies. It's they don't know how close it is. Personally, man and woman doesn't understand. This is something you have your own hands on, or you're in its hands. So when I make the point, it's substantiated. This is not good. And all these biased writers are never, ever attributing evil where it is due, where it needs to be placed. This is a ferocious power that's been haunting this planet for centuries, if not, and for millennia, with almost no culpability. How can you build on ashes? You can't just turn a page. That's called dissociation. That's what the human race has done. They brought down a veil we call the unconscious. And what's in it is so foul that we'd rather live in this tiny little bird box with the left brain as the engine to keep pedaling it. And we go, yeah, everything's cushy, because it's frightful to look into the dark ruins of the past. And we simply will not do it. There's too many defenses. But what I'm saying is that unless you do it, you're going to build tyrannies outside, because everything is self-fulfilling. The more and more you repress these things, the more and more they come back to haunt you in terms of fate. We replay it. We replay the original tyranny. It just comes out in a different form, a different charade.
Exactly.
This is the nature, the compensatory nature of the psyche. And people far greater than me, experts in this, were writing about it. Worried sick. But many of them, sadly, were caught up in this whole vortex of the rising of feminism at the time. Not all. Jung wasn't, but some of these other Jungians and Freudians were. Big time. And so their arrows missed, they missed the target. They thought they were probably doing good.
Really.
Yeah. And we've got to correct their problem. But if we read the last slide, then we can have some concluding remarks.
The mother is earlier than the sun. The feminine has priority, while masculine creativity only appears afterwards as a secondary phenomenon. Thus, male and female do not appear simultaneously. They are not of the same order. The female is primary. The male is only what comes out of her. He is part of the visible but ever-changing created world. He exists only in perishable form. Women exist from everlasting, self-subsistent, immutable. Man, evolving, is subject to continual decay. In the realm of the physical, therefore, the masculine principle is of second rank, subordinate to the feminine. Herein lies the prototype and justification of gynocracy. On this rests the subordination of the masculine principle to that of the mother. The man appears as creature, not as creator, as effect, not cause. The reverse is true of the mother. She comes before the creature, appearing as cause, the prime giver of life, and not as an effect. She is not to be inferred from the creature, but is known in her own right. In a word, the woman first exists as a mother, and the man first exists as a son. J.J. Bachofen, Myth, Religion, and Mother Right.
There you go. So he is one of the pioneers in the 19th century of this matriarchy myth, one of the first writers, and he is clearly showing you that it might read on the first pass as exaltation of the feminine, which it is, but it is really equally the denigration of the masculine. So whether it was him or Briffault, you see, or Hawkes or any of these people, what is going on? Why would a male want to denigrate his own sex? For that matter, why would a woman stoop to feminism and want to over-exalt her own sex? And these are intelligent people with high IQs. Why have none of them noticed this? That they're doing exactly that. You'd thought this would have been 101. Because it's right there on paper. It's not a mystery. All the way through any statement that's biased, you can't exalt the female without automatically implying denigration of the masculine. And you can't imply denigration of the masculine without implying glorification of the female. So now that we can read this again, you start to see that that's exactly what's going on. In life, something has to be first and something has to be second. There's no reason to underline it. It's chicken and the egg. But these people have come in there and they want to make something of this in terms of valuation. Valuation. They're evaluating something that has to come first and saying it is supreme in all ways. But is it? Surely that which comes out of the soil of the mother is the triumph of the mother, is the glorious golden child. That's what she's about. So it's like looking at the same fish from the different sides of the tank. And just because technically speaking, yes, she's first. Something always in life would have to be first. That's logical and rational. But it doesn't mean it's better. That thing which it's offering up could be better. But that's not what they're saying. Now, concealed in the subtextual aspect, you see, is what we've also sort of hinted at subtextually in some of the past slides on the flower children idea, these Dionysian passive types. This is because the phallic principle is always considered part and parcel of the woman, not separate from her. She is the phallic mother. She is the phallic goddess because she births a child. And the child is the living phallus that comes out of her vagina. So she bears a phallus, symbolically speaking. Mm. And he is only valued not as a son, because she breeds 10,000 sons. He is merely the phallic principle that is her principle in the flesh, and is valued entirely based on that. Not in his own identity. That's why, they're talking about them being flower children and weak and passive and docile and barely existing. That's right. That's another way of saying that they are not valued for themselves. They're valued only that they are holders of the phallus. And if one was to fail and not be what is needed, he can be slaughtered. He can be sacrificed. He can be castrated because we have 10,000 to replace him. And the phallic power is what? The power that goes out and says, be violent, build a world so that I have a house to live in. So the violence is perfectly acceptable to the woman in the form of the child lover who's to go out and prepare the way and build the cities and build the towns and the villages to make me comfortable. Then it's perfectly okay to slaughter animals, to cut down the forests, right? And to prepare a way for me to be comfortable. That phallic power is in my keeping, and it is the agent of my will. But later on, something happened with the rise of feminism that started to blame man for being too violent. After he's done all the homework, after he's killed your demons for you and brought you your cushions and your champagne cocktails, now he's too violent. He did everything in your name. He is even symbolically and historically and mythologically and strictly in your service in every conceivable way. But this is the twisted evil of the mind that set this whole thing up. This is how it betrays itself. This is when the veil slips and you find out what necrophilous power is behind the male violence. So evil that it not only inspired the violence to begin with, that did it in its name, but then turns on its agent and humbles him for his own violence, which he did in your name. How the hell can you justify that? He is your acolyte. He is your flower child. He had the will, the power, the tenacity, and the physical strength to go out and build a world that we know. And the woman has made plenty of use of that through the centuries and the millennium. Knew about it centuries ago, millennia ago. She knew how to, breed a son for this very reason. They were on to this immediately. This is a perfect worker ant. Let's use it as such. There's no value in itself, and today it's no different. Nothing has changed in this regard. In fact, if anything, it's even got worse. So the feminism that you see today is nothing but a revival of the old original. If you have to call it goddess tradition, then okay, do so. We can argue about that later. What we're exposing here is the criminal history of womankind and the twisted logic. Maybe aided and abetted by drugs, maybe aided and abetted by God knows what. This thing is really dark. We don't know what bred this. But even on the most pragmatic level, most utilitarian level, the phallic is my possession. Doesn't have any autonomous existence at all. It is merely a muscle for going out and cutting down the jungle, and carrying my litter and bringing me what I need. To do that, I give it complete sovereign right to be as fucking violent and destructive as it needs to be. Because it's in my name. And only in a state of unimaginable self-delusion and self-deceptiveness can the woman now turn around and pretend that that's not the case. And the reason why is because they get away with it. Because these flower children are everywhere. They occupy the centers of government and education, and nobody pushes back. The man has become so feminized, as the great Otto Weininger and many others said it was going to happen. It has now happened. That they can't even see the forest for the trees. No one pushes back. Because the job has been done, even sexually and psychically. There is no masculinity worth a shit today. These are the facts. And you have to back engineer it like we're doing to make any sense of it. Because had there been pushback, women would have immediately backed off and, oh, can't get away with that. All right, let's drop that and move on to something else. But they haven't, because there's been no pushback. In fact, this has been bankrolled. And through the pop videos and whatever else, it's also gone into the right brain, bypasses the conscious circuitry. So now we're in a culture of nothing but flower children, docile bodies, utterly in circulation around the will of the terrible mother. Even if they didn't have one personally, most of them did, but even if they didn't, the vortex, by the time they've gone to college, by the time they become sexual, and the reason why is because nobody is teaching them like this. They don't meet any wise men, elders, or anyone to initiate them into this. To give them the other side of the story, to give them a true account of what's going on. So this is a black file of history of untold crimes. And then, of course, the woman has the absolute simplest reason for doing this. And that is man's violence tends to be photogenic. Highly something you can complain about. Whereas the woman's violence is much more subtle. So let's work on that too. Let's use that. And that's what also has been done over and over again. In order to cover your own crimes, in order to cover your own turpitude, you just keep on wheeling out the same old fucking thing over and over again. It's like playing the race card over and over again.
Yeah.
So true heroism, as defined by only a handful of men, is really something that's been bred out long, long time ago. And we were warned. So these stupid men like J.J. Bakofen and others who were, Jung would say anima possessed. There's also a whole other psychology we can't go into right now to explain why they would be like this. They were colonized in their minds, feminized in their own minds, to not just give woman her natural due, like, yes, you are the progenitor, you give birth to us, but to completely denigrate their own sex. And this caught on.
So would you say then in either a pure form or a partial form, it kind of answered my question from earlier, why these scholars aren't really speaking to this, because in a sense they're like a chivalric man who is loyal to Morgana Le Fay, as you put it.
Mordreds. They're all Mordreds. They're all exactly that. None of them are truly heroic or phallic. So when the woman keeps complaining, the patriarchy, there's no such thing. It's a shibboleth. What patriarchy? What are you talking about? These are men all in your service. Like, you can't imagine. These are like worker ants, blind, obedient, and blinkered, and have been for centuries. What patriarchy are you talking about? The one that has built all the creature comforts that allow you to talk about it? After they brought you all the heads, remember they said Kali's necklace is nothing but testicles and heads? Because this is the definition of evil. It doesn't even care for its own acolytes who go out to sacrifice their own heads to bring you the world. I just kick your head aside after it's over. Okay. You exhausted yourself in my name. I am the goddess of life and of death. I am the womb and the tomb. You are merely a machine in my service. And if we had more gynocracy on this planet, you wouldn't be laughing about what I'm talking about. We are just a few steps away from insane pathocalypse as women gain more and more of the levers of control. Believe you me, you haven't even begun yet. You're only getting a glimmer still. It's bad enough as it is, but this is still a glimmer of what could be.
If I could interject, actually, this is a perfect time to point this out. I've been watching the astrology for some time, and this year keeps popping up that they keep talking about 2030, 2030. We hear about Agenda 2030, etc. As you know, I look at the nodes of all the planets, not just the lunar nodes. So one of the major nodes that we look at is the nodes of Neptune. And the south node of Neptune has been in Aquarius for a very long time, and it very much correlates with the dark Atlantean times, the chimeric experiments, human experimentation, these abominations that you speak of, that you've spoken about in this episode, these abominations of trying to become, connect to spirituality and spiritual power in infernal ways, just for lack of a better term. Anyway, to get to the point, the south node of Neptune hovers around 10 to 14 degrees of Aquarius. We're in Pluto and Aquarius right now. By the time Pluto hits that south node of Neptune, it will be between 2030 and 2033 because it moves so slowly that it will be vacillating back and forth over it. And wouldn't you know it, that it's becoming in the mainstream quite normal. What we see about transhumanism, transsexual sexuality, and now even cloning has become mainstream, where celebrities are cloning their dogs, and it's like a $15,000 job, but they're putting these fetuses into surrogates, cloned fetuses into surrogates to breed them. And eventually, we've also seen that there is a desire to want to just get rid of the womb altogether and have what I like to call bag babies. Babies that are born in bags, essentially, because you don't even necessarily need sperm to do this. So there, you see how this is all aligning with this elimination of the masculine principle, this desire, because total control can only occur if the masculine principle is completely eliminated. From what I can tell, that seems to be their ideology. So I just want to say I have been laughing through this, but I have a dark sense of humor because it's just you gotta kind of laugh, but it's I want to be serious though, that it is deathly serious, quite literally. I mean, when I think
Mm.
about the south node of Neptune and Pluto conjuncting,
Mm.
that I see the sands in the hourglass running out, where we're moving is not in a good direction, and I won't speak to exactly what that means, but what I will say is that how Pluto operates, it is, it excavates what needs to be brought to the surface from the depths and the bowels of our psychology. And this is something we've been avoiding. Our inhumanity, our lack of connection to the biophilus. We are on a necrophilus path. It is a very malignant feminine path. And so I just wanted to bring that information out there as well because, I mean, we're moving into 2026 now. So it's not very long before we reach that conjunction.
Oh, no, no, we're on the precipice. This has been building for a very long time, and it's been doing it in the periphery of our vision. Not one in many millions of people are even close to understanding what we are talking about. So I've been able to put this together from reading multiple scholars, none of whom speak of what I'm talking about. In fact, most of them are on the other side. They've been eulogizing this change. In their own personal lives, you can see that they're itching for it to come about. So I just see the flip side of it, like I've been doing since my Atlantis book, taking that which is well known, sort of, and then turning it on its head and saying, here, what if? And then when I see things falling into place and fitting way better than they did before, then you know you're on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing healthy about this. And their own words talk about this dark goddess. And this is in the ancestral memory, the racial memory. And also it comes with these capsules of amnesia. That's why it's never spoken about. It's more than just evil. It's evil that is blanketed and cloaked.
Yeah.
So it's been able to insinuate itself in all sorts of places. The academies of knowledge are worthless. They're nothing but mills of tyranny. Blake's satanic mills. That's all they are. They fell for materialism years ago. They've stuck with that despite all the other, discoveries. They're perfidious. And anytime they kind of look like they may be going right, it's only because they're raiding the larder of other great scholars that they don't want you to tell you, but it's all plagiarism. So there's not much coming out of it that's actually very positive. In fact, there's nothing but evil coming out of it. And they have major, major agendas that serve this dark power. But what we're trying to do is get into the atavistic understanding of how the masculine and the feminine work. When these writers are valuable in that sense that they give us an insight into how the female psyche perceives what we call malehood or masculinity. She sees it as an attribute of herself, something she gives rise to and birth to. It's her property. But because she can breed it a lot, infinitely, as in her motive of the goddess, the individual is unimportant. The individual does not exist. That means a woman is a collectivist, inside out and upside down, with very few exceptions. Right? So this means that a male for her is simply a tool, like we would use a shovel or an axe or a hammer. Its value lies entirely in that. Man, she doesn't mind drugging his mind to think she's in love with you, pal. It's love, it's intimacy. That has served her really, really well. It's a scream, it's a giggle. And man should know it now. Just go study the divorce courts and tell me I'm wrong. Slowly, 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 the light is beginning to dawn of how you've been had.
I have one more question. I don't know if it's directly related, but just as you talk about all of these children that the woman can breed, the tens of thousands, so you're replaceable. If you don't fall into line, we'll just make another one. It's sort of that that belief you've spoken about. I can't help but think of Lilith as an archetype, because back in the Sumerian times, she was seen as a demon. They even had incantation bowls that they would use. They would speak the incantation in the bowl to get rid of her because she killed babies. She was also connected to the Lilitu, the Lilim, the race of these succubus demonesses who would steal the libido from men. And we see this and even in the, I think it's the Hebrew myth, I might have it wrong exactly, but she didn't want to lay beneath the man, and so she was excommunicated from the garden. And it's interesting because on one hand, I can see the parallel of the myth in one side, but I can also see how it connects to what you're saying, where there's this refusal to submit to the highest authority, in my personal opinion, which is like the great intelligence of like the great spirit, the all that is, like this intelligence that transcends all in many ways, but is all in the material. Again, this is just my perspective, but to bring it to the present, we see this archetype of Lilith being deified as a empowering feminine archetype that is anti-patriarchal, and I just can't help but think about how this could possibly link to the atavistic memory of this righteous entitlement to write the rules here. And then it makes me think of how that could link to the dark occult as well. But I don't know. These are just thoughts that come to mind as you've been sharing all of this.
Oh, the implications are enormous.
Mm.
There really is. And I don't think that sinks into most people's minds, about how you would turn this around. For instance, all drug use would have to stop on the planet.
Mm.
Not medical drugs, but all the other recreational drugs use.
Like sugar?
Yeah. Well, of course, those things too, but just even simple out-of-body experiences,
Oh.
all of that and
Mm.
the means to it, hash, marijuana, mushrooms, ayahuasca, DMT, any and all of that would have to be absolutely stopped.
Mm.
It's not leading you anywhere but into this atavistic whirlpool, this maelstrom, where the female will dominates, right? All religion would have to go, because religion is the occult. Christians like to say, yeah, we warn against the occult. No, you are the occult. Your religions grew out of the occult that we've just talked about, its origin. It's all feminine. How that is, you'd have to read my works on it, to become completely up to speed on that. But basically, that's it. It's just man, the acolyte, the castrati, following the will of the female will, like we've talked about. He becomes then the priesthood. But that's just replacing one evil with another. It's done nothing to change the actual order of things. That's why women slowly was able to gain this atavistic power back again. All of this answers why women were suppressed, as you see in the Old Testament. Well, given the abuses that I've just talked about and the mass death that they caused and the mass evil use of the psychotropics to bamboozle and befuddle, naturally a point came, and it can come again, where a force rose up against womankind. Woman is playing with that right now. Again, this can happen, and she won't come out well. So there's even warnings, because it happened in the past. Because they can only do what they do. They can only do what they do. They can't choose not to do it. And this is a path to destruction, as we see. If they keep on doing what they do, they have to realize there will be a reaction. That's on its way. You see? But in a perfect world without a crisis, without a apocalypse, the things that we'd have to do are so impossible to do, so difficult to implement. You see, this is the difficulty. Now, the in-between stage is what we're doing right now, which is just build up your rational understanding of the problem. That's the middle way. Gain knowledge in the unbiased way. You've had your feminism, they've had their statements. Okay, now we have another perspective. And that will be a bomb. That will help. That will assist. But it will only do it in small, people watching, the individuals watching us who take this seriously. But still, it's a help. Because you're not going to get the other. You're not going to get any massive world shifting. The powers that be are far too strong for that. And they're far too ancient. They're hoary. This goes way back. But what you got to do is what we're doing. Look at the contradictions. In every program we've done, or many of them, we've seen the contradictions. And I just brought up a huge one today. Absolutely huge. How can, in the same flow of years, you get man opening himself, by their own definition, this is their own words, to his feminine side by becoming infinitely more artistic than he was, and in a very, very short period of time. But he also floods the world with misogyny at exactly the same time. I'm sorry, you need to go back. It's like a kid with his homework. No, you got a D-. Go back and rewrite this again. Don't turn up with the same thing again to anybody's table. This is called a major fail. Nobody called him on it.
Yeah.
Nobody ever called on that contradiction or any of the others that we've touched on. And last week, under strange struggle, we had the same thing. How man learned to awaken within him an impulse for violence. It is not natural to him. It was a reaction. Wow. Reaction to what? Nobody knows. Nobody's going to teach you. Nobody's going to tell you. And the man who knew all the details about, this embryonic period also couldn't see what I've said because of this feminization. It's right there. It's right there in front of them, but they couldn't see it.
I think that's a big mic drop there, that reaction, that it's a reaction.
Of course it is.
Yes.
It's a reaction in girls as well. I'm not just talking about men. The little girl feels the same way if her freedom is held back. And even in these slides we just looked at, again, the principle is to hold back from freedom. The Dark Mother, representing the dark roots of Earth, has no freedom in her. She's antithetical to that. The whole problem is when J.J. Bakofen is there saying that the masculine principle becomes secondary. Can I help you unpack that, mate? This masculine principle that you're denigrating and is all secondary and derivative in your eyes is what we call freedom. It's the means by which you kick open the door to freedom and end up navigating freedom in that world. That's what you don't like? I think we can get you lying on the couch here right now. I think we can bring in Mr. Freud right now. I think you've just betrayed your own psychology right now.
Mm-hmm.
Nicely disguised. Good try. Give you an A plus for that. But at the end of the day, how antithetical you must be to freedom and how regressed you must be as a soul to verbalize, you see, a philosophy of this kind, the gynocratic premise. Any psychologist worth their salt would immediately see that you are a regressed type, and worse. Because deep down inside, you must not love freedom. That's why you want to make freedom secondary. No, the greater has come out of the lesser, pal. You got the whole thing upside down and inside out. Yes, technically speaking, the unfree is first. We're not going to argue about that. Of course it is. But that soil, that mud, like an alchemy, that's the negredo from which the higher albedo and the rubedo come.
Mm-hmm.
How come you don't know that? See, so these Bakofens, they're psychopathic. They're deranged.
Yeah.
Yet they wrote books and got public. And they were picked up later on by other charlatans. I'm here to expose it. But you can only do that when you've seen the depth of the problem. And how dangerous it is. And you'd be motivated to say, I've got to do something about this.
And I feel like that's exactly why we're doing this show. You know, part of my own work, I work with people with these archetypes as well, a great many archetypes, but some of these ones we look at, it's part of the reason why, I'm probably one of the only astrologers that will actually go there with Lilith, for instance, instead of deifying her as like an empowering female archetype. That only comes to bear when you look at the most evil of evil that exists within you and transmute it. That's the only time you're going to have a hope of using Lilith in any positive way. So don't put the cart before the horse. But in any case, I'd like to ask Michael, do you have anything else you'd like to share before we conclude the episode? This has been a wonderful episode, but do you have any more you'd like to impart?
No, I think that we've covered some really amazing things here. And the one thing to realize is that the drugs played a big role in bringing in the supernatural, bringing in the occult, and bringing in what would eventually start moving more towards religion. And finally, this was seen as pernicious. There was a period in time about, say, let's give the mark of, say, 1,000 or 2,000 years BC, when the Hebrew patriarchs said, we're done with this. This is outrageous, the power that's been going on for centuries, a millennium. And they did try to kibosh it, right? They changed things around. And then you get your paternalism coming in. But again, it was a reaction. It was a necessary reaction to a gynocratic epoch that it so misused its power, one can't even fathom it. We're just giving glimpses here. And some of it was of horrendous rites and practices, many of which, after being bleached, were brought into religion, like the Eucharist.
Yeah.
When these creeps in these weirdos in the Christian Science and these weird Baptists all dancing around and prancing about and jiggling around, right? Where do you think all that came from? You think that's new? And the baptism in the river and all the dancing with snakes. I keep trying to tell people, none of this is gone. It's all monkey business. It's all nonsense. But it was fueled with actual psychotropic drugs to open up, allegedly other dimensions. But it was a form of mind control. Because women had the secret of patriarchy, paternity, and wanted to misuse it. This simple thing. Then realizing the connection between sexual act and birthing, they were the first to discover it. But the mentality basically was, these children are my product. And no man physically was involved. It's ancestors or spirits. We've given a little example of that today. You see? So I am obviously needing to be deified. And that will be helped if my child goes on these substances and they'll deify me. I am the seat, I am the kingdom, I am the throne. I'm in league with the gods. So I'm a goddess. So the goddess tradition was born out of deception, of taking vulnerable children's minds, putting them on some fucking snake venom, right? And slowly over the centuries, installing false images and making sure that this was followed up over and over again. God knows what they're into. Very, very, very powerful. So, but it's evil because the same medicinal potions, you see, that can heal, you can also withhold or abuse those. And that's what happened. That's why it's evil. The real goddess tradition would have been those women who ministered, and there was these, strictly to heal. Strictly. With no form of manipulation or anything else. No administration and no psychotropic drugs for any purpose. Then we would have been on a different path. See, but that didn't happen. The evil came out because finally power corrupts, right? And when they saw the effect that this had, but then it was compounded because even though this was history for many thousands of years, modern academics and anthropologists have absolutely scrubbed this. They did not want to talk about it. So they're part of the evil. They have not addressed this. So there can be correctives. In fact, many have gone, some of the most eminent have gone on to praise and write bestsellers, super bestsellers in our modern times, filled with glaring contradictions, like I've just pointed out. And they got away with it. Adding more and more to the unnecessary glorification of womankind. Fuck, their women's heads are already big enough, thank you very much. We don't need any more. So you have to combat it. This sort of, these J.J. Bacofans and any of these other writers who are doing this, you have to wonder, is it warranted? I'm all for giving due where it is needed, but I'm also for condemning where it's not. Is there anything positive at all about outer body experiences, fueled by drugs? And to me, the answer is no, not at all. It gave rise to all the baloney and bogus shit we've got on the East, in the Far East in India, on the banks of the Ganges and all over that country, right? It gave rise to all that, knee deep in charlatans, and everywhere else, and now in the West. It's the same. Man should be contemplating the mysteries, but he doesn't need any help, from these substances at all. But what he's not aware of is this female component. So I just hope, it's been a great show. We've been able to point this out. We did a few last week, but I thought it would be good to spend an hour or so, to really show. You get into it just a little bit deeper. But for those who are interested more in this, there's still huge sections. I want people to, go to the Monstrous Feminine series, especially my premium 2 shows, the Female Illuminati program, All on Enslaved, check those out. Really convince yourselves, and then read all the articles on the Female Illuminati website. Very, very helpful. Start with From Heaven to Earth. Because female secret societies actually precede male secret societies. That tiny little slide that you had about the islands where the women, held authority and taught the mysteries from these little communities. It's all true. And they go way back, way, way, way back. So you can quibble about the term matriarchy, but yes, there were these communities of very, 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 very astute and powerful women, and most of their power came from the use of these, we'll call them medicines. But the moment that you have power like that is the moment that you're now tempted to misuse it for whatever reason. And that is exactly what happened. And when they got the power, they got addicted to it, and it just continued down through history, with almost no one doing anything until finally, it changed around, and then we get the so-called evil patriarch, if you want to call it that. But all that was an act of revenge. But unfortunately, the culprit that was being penalized and prosecuted harbored great animosity towards those prosecutors and swore, that we'll have this power back. And so in our modern age, that's what we've seen. And the people behind the institutions, you asked about them earlier.
Yes.
These people, women wouldn't have been able to make any headway without their help. The institutions, and this means the magazines, the institutions of learning, feminism, and the colleges, they had all to be in it. Ordinary women wanted this power, but they had no way of knowing how to go get it. So this was absolutely stimulated methodically by the very institutions that we've discussed, particularly the magazines, particularly the women's magazines in the women's world, and programs designed, sitcoms, ad copy, the whole thing, to stimulate back here, because words won't do it, but images will. You've got to bypass the centers and go back to the limbic. Otherwise, this atavistic thing doesn't work. So it's all done through popular culture. To reach and awaken and rekindle and re-trigger very, very, very deep satanic desires that go right beyond the head of the man. The man is not even in that world. He doesn't know what you're talking about. As I say, he's lost in the world of romance. Doesn't have a fucking clue, right? His hormones, by the time he's a teenager, have put him completely under the power of women and their sex. So he's a useless, absolutely useless. And that's just, aids and abets the evil that we're talking about. He's like a puppet on a string. But something has been going down on our planet. That very, very, very few authors, maybe Frank Herbert, member of the Bene Gesserits. I don't know if you're familiar with the Dune books.
I've actually been avoiding them.
I
really need to watch those, or watch the movie, read the books. Yes.
There's an odd reference here and there, but you have to spend a whole lifetime compiling it, like I've done. And then it's taken loads and loads of time, to put these presentations together as well, so that they're done right. So yeah, big thanks to you again for reading those. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Giving this opportunity.
Oh, well, right back at you, Michael. This is invaluable information. I can't get across to listeners just how invaluable this is. I'm learning so much, and I'm just super happy that we have the opportunity to share this with others, because even though we'll only be able to push the needle so far with our efforts, there are people who are screaming for this information because there's a part of them that knows. It's just not reached the consciousness yet, and hopefully this will help to stimulate that. And yeah, I just, can't thank you enough. Like I said, this is invaluable, people, and I'm sure if you've listened all the way to the end that you're getting that on some level, in some measure. So yeah, thanks again, Michael. And I suppose we'll end it here, and check back everyone for more, because I'm sure that we're just scratching the surface here.
And with that, we bring this episode of The Dark Side of the Female Psyche to a close. There's still more to come in this series, so make sure you're subscribed to Willfully Evolving Woman here on YouTube and turn on your notifications so that you'll know when the next episode is ready. More social media accounts may be added in due time, so if that interests you, bookmark willfullyevolvingwoman.com and be sure to check back periodically. If you would like to follow Michael and learn more from him, you can find his works through the following channels: dragonmother.org, femalepsychology.org, and of course, michaeltsarion.com. And if you're interested in Michael's premium presentations and the Unslaved podcast, you can find those by becoming a member at unslaved.com or unslaved.substack.com. I'm Sarah DeHaven, and on behalf of Michael and myself, thank you for being here, and thank you for listening. See you in the next episode.